What if I told you that during my years of studying the human psyche, I discovered something that goes far beyond psychology? What if the unconscious mind isn't just a repository of forgotten memories, but actually a bridge between this world and what lies beyond? And what if I identified 5 unmistakable signals that the afterlife is reaching out to you right now, calling you toward a profound transformation? Throughout my lifetime of work with patients, dreams, and the deepest mysteries of human consciousness, I encountered phenomena that science cannot fully explain. Phenomena that suggest the boundary between life and death is far more permeable than we dare to imagine. This isn't speculation. This isn't mysticism for its own sake. This is based on decades of clinical observation, personal experience, and encounters with forces that exist beyond the rational mind. Because what I discovered is this: the afterlife doesn't wait silently until we die. It sends signals. It reaches across the veil. It calls to us while we're still living, preparing us for the great transition we must all eventually face. If you've been experiencing strange synchronicities, if your dreams have taken on an otherworldly quality, if you feel something vast and mysterious pulling at the edges of your awareness, stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal might change not just how you understand death, but how you comprehend the very nature of existence itself. Let me begin by sharing something I rarely spoke about publicly, something that even my closest colleagues found difficult to accept. The collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of human experience and ancestral memory that connects all of humanity, isn't confined to this world alone. During my near-death experience in 1944 after my heart attack, I found myself in a place that was more real than physical reality. I floated above the earth, saw the globe from space, and then entered a temple carved from a massive stone. There I encountered presences, beings of light who communicated without words. I felt on the verge of entering a space where I would understand everything, where all questions would be answered. But I was sent back, told it wasn't my time, and when I returned to my body, I carried with me a knowing that has haunted me ever since. The afterlife isn't some distant realm separated from our reality by an impenetrable wall. It exists alongside our world, interpenetrating with it, constantly sending signals to those who have developed the sensitivity to perceive them. For years afterward, I studied these signals in my patients, in myself, in the dreams and visions of countless individuals standing at the threshold between worlds. And I identified 5 distinct patterns, 5 unmistakable signals that the afterlife is actively reaching out, calling to someone still living in the physical realm. If this resonates with something you've been experiencing, if you sense there's more to reality than what your 5 senses reveal, I need you to like this video now. Because what we're about to explore together requires intellectual courage and spiritual openness. The first signal I identified is what I called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy rational explanation. But when the afterlife begins calling to someone, these synchronicities don't just occur occasionally. They multiply, they intensify, they become impossible to ignore. You think of a deceased loved one, and immediately their favorite song plays on the radio. You dream of a specific symbol, and the next day it appears 3 times in unconnected contexts. You wonder about a question, and within hours, a stranger says exactly the words you needed to hear. During my practice, I observed this pattern repeatedly in patients who were undergoing profound psychological transformation. But the most intense synchronicities occurred in those who were, unknown to them, approaching major life transitions, including the ultimate transition of death. Why does this happen? Because synchronicity is evidence that the psyche extends beyond the individual. It demonstrates that consciousness participates in a larger order, and a causal connecting principle that links inner and outer reality. And when the afterlife begins to call, when the veil between worlds grows thin for a particular individual, this connecting principle becomes hyperactive. The universe, or perhaps I should say the collective unconscious, begins orchestrating coincidences that carry profound meaning. These aren't random. They're communications from the deeper layers of reality, preparing the individual for what I called individuation, the process of becoming whole, which ultimately includes integrating the reality of death itself. Have you noticed synchronicities multiplying in your life? Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward understanding what might be calling to you from beyond the veil. The second signal is something I encountered so frequently in my work that I came to see it as one of the most reliable indicators of communication between realms. I'm speaking of visitation dreams, dreams where deceased individuals appear with startling clarity and deliver specific messages. These dreams are qualitatively different from ordinary dreams. In a normal dream, deceased persons appear as projections of our own psyche, symbols of unresolved grief or aspects of ourselves. But in visitation dreams, there's an unmistakable quality of otherness. The deceased person appears with autonomous will, with knowledge you don't possess, with a presence that feels absolutely real. I remember a patient who dreamed of her deceased father 3 nights in succession. He appeared not as she remembered him in illness, but radiant and healthy. Each time he told her the same thing: prepare the house. A change is coming. She dismissed it as grief. 2 weeks later, her husband had a massive stroke that transformed their entire lives. Her father somehow had known, had warned her, had reached across the boundary between life and death to prepare her. This wasn't an isolated case. I documented dozens of similar experiences, deceased relatives appearing to warn of danger, to offer guidance during crisis, to prepare the living for imminent transformation, and most significantly, appearing to those who were themselves beginning the process of transition, gently acclimating them to the reality that consciousness continues beyond physical death. The afterlife, I came to understand, isn't a static place. It's populated by consciousness that retains connection to those still living. And when the time approaches for someone to cross over, or when they need guidance for their soul's development, these connections intensify. The dead appear in dreams, not as memories, but as active participants in an ongoing relationship that transcends the apparent finality of death. When these visitation dreams occur with increasing frequency, when they carry information you couldn't possibly know, when the deceased communicate with purpose and clarity, this is the afterlife reaching out. This is consciousness on the other side making contact, preparing you, calling to something deep within your soul. Now we come to something that many will find difficult to believe, yet I observed it repeatedly throughout my career. When the afterlife begins calling to someone, they start encountering what I term the archetypes, primordial images from the collective unconscious that represent fundamental patterns of human experience. But these aren't just abstract psychological concepts. In moments when the veil grows thin, the archetypes manifest with almost physical presence. Patients would report encounters with the wise old man, the great mother, the shadow, the divine child, figures that seem to exist independently of their personal psychology. I myself experienced this during my confrontation with the unconscious after my break with Freud. I encountered Philemon, a wise figure with the wings of a kingfisher who taught me things I did not consciously know. He was, in a sense, more real than any living person I knew. He represented a voice from the collective unconscious, perhaps even from the realm beyond death itself. These archetypal encounters serve a specific purpose. They are the psyche's way of preparing for the ultimate transformation. The archetypes are, in essence, the inhabitants of the collective unconscious, and the collective unconscious is the doorway to the afterlife. When you begin encountering these primordial images with unusual frequency or intensity, it means you're being drawn toward that doorway. You might see these archetypes in dreams, in active imagination, or even in waking visions. You might encounter them projected onto living people who suddenly seem to embody mythological significance. The key indicator is the numinous quality of these encounters, a sense of the sacred, the overwhelming, the wholly other breaking into your everyday reality. This is the afterlife asserting its presence, reminding you that beneath the surface of ordinary consciousness lies a vast realm populated by eternal patterns, by forms of being that exist beyond individual human life. And when you start perceiving these patterns, you're beginning to see reality as it truly is, a multi-layered mystery where the physical is merely the outermost shell. If you're experiencing encounters that feel larger than life, if certain people or images carry an inexplicable power that seems to reach beyond the personal, share this speech with someone who might understand, because these experiences can feel isolating and even frightening without a proper framework for comprehension. The fourth signal is more subtle but perhaps perhaps more significant than all the others. I called it the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to hold opposites in tension and produce from that tension something entirely new, a third thing that transcends and unites the opposites. When the afterlife begins calling, this function activates with unusual intensity. You find yourself able to hold paradoxes that would have previously seemed impossible. You can feel profound grief and profound peace simultaneously. You can acknowledge the reality of death while experiencing the certainty of something eternal. You can live fully in the physical world while sensing the spiritual reality that interpenetrates it. This isn't intellectual understanding, it's a lived experience of consciousness operating at a higher level, a level that naturally emerges as one approaches the threshold between worlds. Because you see, the afterlife exists in a state where all opposites are reconciled. Time and timelessness coexist. Individual and universal are one. Life and death are revealed as complementary aspects of a greater whole. When the transcendent function activates, you're being given a foretaste of this unified consciousness. You're developing the capacity to perceive reality from both sides of the veil simultaneously. This is preparation, essential preparation, for the moment when you will fully cross over and must learn to exist in a realm where ordinary dualistic thinking no longer applies. I experienced this intensely during my own near-death experience, and in the months that followed, I could see the temporal and the eternal at once. I understood that my individual life was simultaneously completely real and completely illusory. I existed as Carl Jung and as something vastly larger than any individual identity. This activation often manifests as sudden breakthroughs in understanding, moments of illumination where complex philosophical or spiritual questions suddenly resolve themselves. It appears as an increased capacity for holding ambiguity without anxiety, for accepting mystery without needing to force it into rational categories. When you notice this happening in yourself, when paradoxes stop troubling you and start revealing deeper truths, this is the afterlife reshaping your consciousness. This is preparation for a mode of being that transcends the limitations of physical existence. And now we arrive at the most profound signal of all, what I term the encounter with the self. Not the ego, not the personal identity, but the self. The archetype of wholeness, the totality of the psyche, the God image within. When the afterlife is truly calling someone, they begin to experience the presence of the self with overwhelming intensity. This manifests as a sense of being guided by something infinitely wiser than the conscious mind, of being drawn toward completion, of participating in a destiny that extends far beyond this single lifetime. You might experience this as a feeling of coming home to yourself, of finally understanding who you truly are beneath all the masks and roles you've played. You might sense a presence within your own psyche that seems to know everything about you, that loves you unconditionally, that guides you with perfect wisdom toward your ultimate fulfillment. This is not grandiosity. This is not ego inflation. It's precisely the opposite. It's the ego finally recognizing that it's not the center of the psyche, that it serves something far greater, something that connects directly to the eternal. During my own encounter with death, I experienced the self as a presence of overwhelming luminosity. It was myself, and yet infinitely more than myself. It was my essence, my eternal core, that which would continue when Carl Jung ceased to exist. And in recognizing it, I understood that death was not an ending, but a return to this deeper identity. When this signal manifests, you might feel an urgent need to complete your life's work, to express your deepest truth, to align your outer life with your inner reality. This isn't neurotic compulsion. It's the self asserting its primacy, preparing you to transition from ego consciousness to self-consciousness, which is another way of describing the movement from this life to whatever lies beyond. The call of the self often brings with it a sense of peace that transcends understanding, even if circumstances are difficult, even if death or major transformation looms. There's a deep okayness, a sense that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. This is because you've made contact with the part of you that doesn't die, that has always existed and will always exist. So what do you do when you recognize these signals? How do you respond when the afterlife begins calling? First, honor what's happening. Don't dismiss these experiences as imagination or pathology. I spent my entire career documenting the reality of these phenomena. They deserve your respect and careful attention. Second, engage in active imagination. Sit quietly and allow images to arise from the unconscious. Dialogue with the figures that appear. This practice can help you consciously participate in the communication between realms rather than being overwhelmed by it. Third, record your dreams meticulously. The unconscious speaks primarily through symbols and images. Your dreams during this time contain crucial information about your soul's journey and what awaits you beyond this life. Fourth, embrace the process of individuation. Work toward wholeness. Integrate your shadow. Develop your underdeveloped functions. Become as complete as possible in this lifetime, because consciousness continues to develop beyond death, and the work you do now serves your eternal development. Finally, remember this. Death is not the opposite of life. It's the completion of life. It's the moment when the ego, that small identity you've carried through this existence, reunites with the self, that eternal core that has always been your true nature. The signals we've discussed aren't warnings to fear. They're invitations to transformation. They're evidence that you exist in a universe far more mysterious and meaningful than materialist science suggests. They're proof that consciousness transcends physical existence, and that something vast and loving is guiding your journey through all its phases, including the ultimate phase of transition. I learned through my own encounter with death that we don't just have a soul, we are souls. And the physical life we're living is just one chapter in an infinitely long story of consciousness knowing itself more fully. When these 5 signals appear, when synchronicities multiply, when the dead visit your dreams, when archetypal forces become visible, when the transcendent function activates, when the self calls, you're being prepared for the greatest adventure of all. Not an ending, but a transformation beyond anything you can currently imagine. This is what I discovered, this is what I know, and this is why there is ultimately nothing to fear and everything to embrace, even in the face of our most mysterious and profound transition. The afterlife isn't waiting for you somewhere in the distant future. It's calling to you now, inviting you to wake up to the full reality of what you are, an eternal consciousness having a temporary physical experience, preparing always for the return to that vast luminous source from which we all emerged and to which we all inevitably return. Trust the signals, honor the call, and know that you are so much more than you have ever dared to imagine.